me. The world wants to tell you that we're all the same, that if you just sit next to me at a table, the playing field is even. But I know better. You know better. Culture is the soul of a people. It's in the food we eat, the music we dance to, the stories we pass down. You can't erase that. You can't bury it. Put a man from one culture in another man's party, and he'll feel the rhythm ain't his. The beat don't move him. The songs don't speak to him. You see, together in the same room doesn't mean together in spirit. That's the truth nobody wants to admit. Now let me tell you what integration really means when you don't own nothing. It means you sitting at somebody else's table, hoping they pass you a plate. It means searching the jukebox for a sound of your own and finding nothing but their voices. It means being allowed in the room, but never owning the house. He's a champ, and I don't want just to be in the house. I want to build my own. I want land where my people can work, jobs where our hands create, a future where our children don't beg for a seat. They sit at the head of their own table, because until we can do for ourselves, we will always be chained to someone else's mercy. Look at the numbers. Millions strong. 40 million souls with fire in their hearts. That's not a minority. That's a nation waiting to rise, but they don't want you to see it. They whisper plans, push papers, tell our women not to bring more children into this world. Why? Because they know our strength is in our numbers. They know if we wake up, the ground will shake. I'm awake now. And when a man we can't put him back to sleep, I see the system for what it is, a leash chain. A chain, a trick dressed up as equality. And I'm done begging. I'm done waiting. I'm done asking permission to breathe. So here's my solution. Let me stand on my own. Give me the soil to plant, the tools to build, the freedom to fail and rise again. Don't tell me to integrate into a system that wasn't built for me. Let me create a system for myself. Because dependence is death, but independence is life. And when history speaks my name, I don't want them to say I was just a fighter or just a voice. I want them to say he mixed love with courage. He took patience and turned it into action. He poured kindness into strength. And he served it to his people across a lifetime. That's the recipe. That's the vision. That's the fight. Listen closely, because this is not just talk, it's truth. People will tell you that all cultures are the same, that if you mix everyone in the same pot, everything will work out smooth. But I've lived long enough, I've seen enough, and I know better. You know it too. Deep down you can feel it. Every people walks with its own rhythm, carries its own song, cooks with its own spice, and dreams with its own stories. That cannot be erased, no matter how much the world tries to tell you otherwise. When you sit down at a table, and the food ain't seasoned the way your grandmother made it, something in your spirit knows. When the music plays and your feet don't want to move, something in your soul feels the difference. That's culture, that's identity. That's not hate, it's reality. Let me paint the picture for you. Imagine two parties tonight, one on each side of town. Both are full of laughter, both are full of people, both got music blasting through the speakers. But you walk into one party, and the rhythm grabs you. It pulls you. It shakes your very bones. You don't even have to think. The beat tells your body what to do. That's your culture calling you home. Now you walk into the other party, and the people are smiling. They're having fun, but the music sounds like foreign words to your ears. The food on the table doesn't taste like love, doesn't taste like memory, doesn't taste like you. You're in the room, but you're not at home. That's the truth about culture. It's deeper than skin, deeper than language, deeper than geography. It's the spirit of a people. Now they tell us, integration is the answer. Just sit together, eat together, work together, and the problems disappear. But tell me, how can you be equal at the table when the table ain't yours? How can you call it progress when you're still searching the jukebox, desperate to hear a sound that feels like home? How can you call it unity when you can't even find yourself in the story being told? I've walked into restaurants where the jukebox played song after song, name after name, sound after sound, and not one spoke to me. Not one came to my world. I've walked into places where every picture on the wall told a story, but none of the faces looked like mine. And you want to tell me that's equality? No, that's not equality. That's being allowed in the room while being reminded every second that the room was never built for you. See, integration without ownership is an illusion. It's like being a guest at a dinner, but never being asked what you want to eat. It's like being in the choir, but never being given a solo. It's like living in a house, but never having your name on the deed. You're present, but you're not powerful. You're included, but you're not in control. And don't get me wrong, I don't say this with hate in my heart. I don't say this to divide. I say this because truth is the foundation of freedom. When you deny truth, you deny yourself. And the truth is every people has the right to their own rhythm, their own flavor, their own dream. If you erase it, you erase the very soul of who they are. Think about it. You can integrate schools, you can integrate buses, you can integrate workplaces, but can you integrate soul? Can you integrate spirit? Can you take two different melodies, written in two different keys, and force them to sound like one song? You can try, but it will always be off. It will always clash. Not because one is better than the other, but because they are meant to stand on their own. And that's where the problem lies. Society says, if you just sit here, if you just eat here, if you just live here, everything will be solved. But I know better. You know better. Because presence without power is still weakness. Togetherness without respect is still oppression. And so long as a man can sit at the table but still feel invisible, then integration has failed. Culture is not a costume you can put on and take off. It is not a dish you can taste once and then move on. Culture is the blood that flows through your veins, the song that echoes in your chest, the memory of your ancestors calling you forward. And when you strip a man of his culture, when you tell him to forget it, to bury it, to trade it for something else, you don't free him, you enslave him all over again. So I say this loud, I will not forget my rhythm. I will not bury my song. I will not trade the flavor of my people for a seat at someone else's table. If you want me to sit with you, then respect what I bring. Respect my music, respect my food, respect my history, respect my truth. Because integration without respect is nothing more than assimilation. And assimilation is just another name for silence. They told us that integration was freedom. They told us that sitting in the same restaurant, riding the same bus, walking through the same doors, that this was victory. They painted it like a picture of progress, as if sharing space meant sharing power. But I've lived long enough to see the cracks in that picture. I've seen the truth hidden behind the promise. Because integration, the way they sold it, doesn't mean true equality. No, it means you can sit next to me, but you still don't see me. It means you can let me through the door, but you still keep the keys. It means you can let me drink from the same fountain, but you still control the water. That's not equality. That's decoration. That's fandom. That's not illusion. When a man walks into a room and sees every wall decorated with faces that look nothing like his, every song on the jukebox singing voices that sound nothing like his, every dish on the table tasting nothing like home, then what is integration to him? He is in the room, but he is not of the room. He is present, but he is invisible. Tell me, what is the meaning of equality if my presence doesn't change the story being told? What is the meaning of freedom if my rhythm still has to wait in the shadows? What is the meaning of victory if all I've won is a seat in a house where I don't own a single brick? They tell us to celebrate it. They tell us to clap our hands because we can walk through the same doors now. But think about it. What good is walking through a door if the rules inside still belong to somebody else? What good is eating at the same table if you never taste your own culture on the plate? What good is sharing a bus ride if the destination was never chosen by you? That's what they don't want you to see. That's the trick. They hand you a chair and call it power. They let you sit and call it freedom. But the truth is, you're still depending on them. You're still living by their music, their manners, their rules, their story. And as long as you depend on someone else to define your worth, you will never know what it feels like to be free. He's a champ. Let me ask you, what does it mean to be equal in a system that you don't control? What does it mean to be integrated into a structure that was never built for you in the first place? You're not building, you're borrowing. He's a champ. You're not owning, and you're not rising, you're waiting for permission to climb. And I don't want a favor. I don't want a seat handed to me at somebody else's table. I want a table of my own. I want to walk into a room and hear my music play loud, my history painted on the walls, my food seasoned with the hands of my people. That's not just pride. That's survival. Because when you don't see yourself, you begin to forget yourself. And when you forget yourself, you become nothing more than a shadow walking in someone else's light. Don't misunderstand me. I don't reject sharing. I don't reject peace. I don't reject unity. But unity without respect is slavery. Equality without power is an empty word. And integration without ownership is just assimilation. And assimilation is silence dressed in disguise. Think about the word integration. They want you to melt into their system, their way of life, their vision of the world. But tell me, when two metals melt together, which one bends? Which one loses its form? Which one gets consumed by the fire? Too often it's us. Too often it's our rhythm, our culture, our identity that gets watered down, silenced, erased. And here's the truth: if your presence requires me to erase myself, then it's not presence, it's prison. If your equality requires me to bury my roots, then it's not equality, it's erasure. If your integration requires me to be less of myself, then it's not integration, it's domination. So when I speak not against people, but against illusions. I speak not against sitting together, but against the lie that sitting together is enough. Because it's tried it. We've lived it. And still, we search for ourselves in the corners of their rooms, in the shadows of their songs, in the empty spaces of their history books. No more. I want more of the no more. I want more of this house. Because until a man can stand in his full truth, until a people can walk in their full identity, until culture is celebrated and not erased, integration will remain nothing more than a word painted on a door that still locks from the inside. Let me tell you something plain: a man who cannot do for himself is not free. People who cannot provide for themselves are not free. You can call it equality, you can call it progress, you can put all kinds of fancy names on it. But if you still depend on another man for your food, your shelter, your livelihood, then you are living on a leash. Think about it. What good is sitting at the same counter if the food on your plate still comes from someone else's kitchen? What good is working in the same factory if every paycheck you earn comes with a chain tied around it? What good is walking through the same doors if you don't own the building? That's why I say self-sufficiency is the key. Work is the key. Ownership is the key. Because until a man owns something, until a people own something, they are always at the mercy of someone else. I don't want my people begging for a slice when we can bake our own bread. I don't want my children waiting in line when they can build their own table. I don't want us knocking on doors that were never meant to open for us, when we can raise walls, lay bricks, and make a home that is truly ours. Look around this country. Every group that rises, every group that thrives, has one thing in common they do for themselves. They build their own businesses, their own schools, their own banks, their own systems. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait for favors. They don't wait for someone else to hand it over. They create, they own, they control, and yet too many of us are still told to be satisfied with being included. Too many of us still told that a job in someone else's company is success, that a seat in someone else's office is progress. But tell me, what happens when that company closes its doors? What happens when that office throws you out? What happens when the hand that fed you suddenly pulls away? You're left hungry, you're left stranded, you're left powerless. Dependence is a trap. It feels like comfort, but it's a chain. It feels like safety, but it's a leash. And as long as we live by another man's hand, we will always live by his rules. That's why I don't just want a job in someone else's system. I want jobs we create for ourselves. I don't just want to eat in someone else's restaurant. I want land where we grow our own food. I don't just want a house I rent from another man. I want neighborhoods, cities, and nations built with our own hands. That's not separation, that's survival. That's not division. That's dignity. Look at the history books. Every empire that stood tall, every people who lifted themselves up, they did it by creating something of their own. Nobody handed it to them. Nobody said, here, take a piece of what I've built. They fought, they worked, they sacrificed, they dreamed, and they built. And we must do the same. But the system doesn't want that. The system would rather you stay dependent. Because a dependent man is easy to control. A dependent people are easy to manipulate. As long as you wait on someone else to feed you, they can control when you eat. As long as you wait on someone else to employ you, they control whether you work. As long as you wait on someone else to accept you, They control whether you feel worthy. And I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of begging. I'm tired of living on borrowed breath. My people deserve more. My people deserve to stand on their own, to work with their own hands, to see their own children rise on the foundation of something that belongs to them. This isn't just about money. It's not just about land. It's about dignity. It's about pride. It's about waking up in the morning and knowing that no matter what happens to the world around you, your people will survive because they can provide for themselves. You see, when you own nothing, you live in fear. But when you own something, you live with strength. When you depend on others, you walk in chains. But when you depend on yourself, you walk in freedom. And I would rather struggle in freedom than live in comfort on a leash. So I stand here to say, give me the chance to build. Give me the chance to work. Give me the chance to rise. Not on borrowed power, not on borrowed land, not on borrowed dreams, but on my own, on our own. Because only then will we know the true taste of freedom. Let me tell you something that the world won't admit: dependence is weakness. It does not matter how shiny the chains are. It does not matter how sweet the food tastes. It does not matter how soft the pillow feels. If another man holds your survival in his hand, then you are not free. Think about it. A child depends on his parents for food, for shelter, for clothing. And that's natural because he is a child. But what happens when that child grows up and still depends on someone else to survive? He has the body of a man but the power of a boy. And that is exactly what dependence does to a people. It keeps them children, waiting for someone else to feed them, waiting for someone else to clothe them, waiting for someone else to open the door. Every day I see it. I see men and women who are strong, intelligent, capable, yet living like beggars because their entire livelihood depends on the decisions of somebody else. They wake up in the morning not knowing their job will still be there tomorrow. They work hard all day, but the profits go to someone else's pocket. They wait on government checks. They wait on company paychecks. They wait on doors that may never open. That is not living. That is waiting. And waiting is weakness. Let me break it down. If your food comes from another man's store, then your hunger is in his hands. If your job comes from another man's business, then your future is in his hands. If your voice comes from another man's media, then your story is in his hands. If your survival depends on another man's system, then your destiny is in his hands. And a man without control of his destiny is a man walking on borrowed time. They want you dependent. Don't fool yourself. That's the design. Because the dependent people are easy to manage. You don't need chains when you can control a man's paycheck. You don't need whips when you control his stomach. You don't need cages when you can control his housing. Dependence is the modern chain. Dependence is the silent leash. Dependence is slavery dressed in new clothes. And yet, too many of us wear it like comfort. We say, hey, at least I got food, at least I got work, at least I got a place to stay. But what happens when they pull it away? What happens when the store shelves run empty? What happens when the job disappears? What happens when the lights go off? Then the truth shows itself. Then the leash tightens. Then you realize you never had freedom. You only had permission. And permission is not power. Permission can be taken away. Permission can vanish in an instant. One change of policy, one stroke of a pen, one decision in an office far away, and everything you depend on is gone. That is the fragility of dependence. That is the weakness of building your life on somebody else's foundation. But when you can provide for yourself, when you can stand on your own, when you can feed your own children, clothe your own family, build your own homes, then nobody can pull the rug from under you. That is freedom. That is dignity. Dependence is like leaning on a crutch that doesn't belong to you. As long as it's there, you can stand. But the moment it's snatched away, you fall. And the cruelest part is, they enjoy watching you fall because your weakness feeds their strength. Your dependence feeds their control. Your reliance feeds their power. Look around the world. The groups that thrive are the groups that depend on no one but themselves. They trade with others, yes. They connect with others, yes. But at their core, they can stand alone. They don't beg for survival. They don't wait for handouts. They don't follow policies. They create, they own, they sustain. That's why they are respected. Because respect comes not from asking, but from having. And that's the lesson for us. If we keep depending on another man's system, we will always be second-class citizens in a world that pretends to be equal. If we keep leaning on their crutches, we will never learn to walk on our own 2 feet. If we keep waiting on their permission, we will never taste the real meaning of freedom. I say enough. Enough of waiting. Enough of begging. Enough of living on borrowed breath. Because dependency keeps us weak, and weakness is the enemy of progress. We must rise to build for ourselves. We must to provide for ourselves. We must rise to depend on no one but ourselves. That is the only way forward. That is the only way to live. Let me remind you of something most people overlook. Strength is not just in muscle. Strength is in numbers. Power is not only about the individual, it is about the collective. And we, my people, we are not few, we are not scattered fragments lost in the wind. We are millions, tens of millions. A nation within a nation, a force that cannot be ignored. 40 million souls, think about that. That is not a minority, that is a movement waiting to be born. That is not weakness, that is potential overflowing. But here's the tragedy: 40 million with no direction, like a river with no banks. It spills everywhere, it moves nowhere, it drowns, but it's not drive. And that is where we are today, strong in numbers, weak in purpose. Numbers alone do not guarantee power. An army of 100 men, trained, disciplined, moving as one, can defeat 1,000 men running in chaos. A few people with unity can outlast a crowd living in confusion. That is why they keep us distracted. That is why they keep us divided. That is why they whisper lies into our ear. Because they know if we ever find unity, if we ever find direction, if we ever march together instead of wandering alone, nothing on this earth could stop us. Imagine it. Imagine 40 million people buying from each other, building with each other, investing in each other. Imagine 40 million people raising their children with pride, teaching them to own, teaching them to lead, teaching them to build. Imagine 40 million people speaking with one voice, voting with one mind, standing with one purpose. That is not just power, that is transformation. That is not just a community, that is a nation within itself. But instead, too many of us are turned against each other. Too many of us are fighting battles that don't matter. Too many of us are blinded by the distractions they feed us. Celebrity gossip, petty arguments, empty promises. While we argue, they profit. While we divide, they rule. While we sleep, they strengthen their grip. 40 million is a blessing, but a wasted blessing if we don't know what to do with it. A blessing that becomes a curse if we let it scatter. Because numbers without unity are just noise. But numbers with vision are a symphony that shakes the earth. And don't think they don't see. Don't think they don't fear it. They know our strength better than we do. That is why they work day and night to keep us small in spirit, even if we are great in numbers. That is why they design systems to control birth, to silence voices, to shrink generations. They whisper policies into the ears of our women, telling them not to have children, telling them to limit their families, telling them to cut the roots before the tree can grow. Why? Because they fear the forest we could become. They know what 40 million strong, awake and aware would mean. It would mean we no longer beg. It would mean we no longer wait. It would mean we rise. And that is the one thing the system cannot afford. The awakening of a nation within its borders. So let me be clear, our numbers are not a weakness. They are our greatest strength. But only if we learn to harness them. Only if we stop wasting them. Only if we turn noise into unity, chaos into strategy, individuals into community. You see, the difference between a crowd and a people is purpose. A crowd gathers for a moment, then scatters. A people build for a future, and they endure. Right now, we are too often a crowd. But we must become a people. We must see that every child born is not a burden, but a soldier of tomorrow. We must see that every voice raised is not a nuisance, but a note in a larger song. We must see that every one of us, every hand, every mind, every heart has a place in the movement. 40 million is not a statistic. 40 million is not a number on paper. 40 million is an army waiting to wake up. 40 million is a nation waiting to rise. 40 million is the proof that we are not small, not weak, not powerless. We are enough. We have always been enough. But the question is not whether we are enough. The question is, will we act like it? Will we unite? Will we focus? Will we take our strength and turn it into something unstoppable? Because numbers without purpose are wasted. But numbers with purpose, numbers with vision, change the world. Let me strip away the mask and tell you the truth. Weakness is not an accident. It's not just circumstance. It's not just bad luck. Weakness is a design. Weakness is a business. Weakness is the very fuel that keeps the system running. See, the powerful don't just profit from your strength. They profit from your struggle. They don't just survive on your labor. They thrive on your dependency. Every crack in your foundation, every tear in your community, every fight among yourselves becomes their advantage. That's why you're never truly free inside their system, because your weakness is their wealth. Think about it. Why is it that in the richest nations on earth, whole communities still suffer? Why is it that with all the technology, all the progress, all the supposed equality, poverty still has a permanent address in our neighborhoods? It's not by accident, it's by design. Because when you're too busy struggling to eat, you don't have the time to rise. When you're too busy fighting your neighbor, you don't see the hand pulling the strings above you. They benefit from your weakness. That's why the schools in your communities are broken while theirs shine. That's why your neighborhoods are starved of investment while there's overflow. That's why your culture is sold back to you in pieces, stripped of its soul. He's a champ, so they can profit from your identity while erasing your dignity. They benefit when you doubt yourself. They benefit when you fight each other. They benefit when you settle for scraps, while they feast on the table you built with your labor. And look at the media, look at the stories they tell about you. They don't highlight your brilliance, your genius, your creativity. They spotlight your pain, your crime, your weakness. Why? Because perception is power. If the world believes you are weak, then they can treat you as weak. If you believe you are weak, then you live as weak. As long as you live that way, they keep winning. It's not just about poverty. It's not just about image. It's about control. They design policies to keep your families broken, your communities divided, your voices silenced. They tell your women not to raise children. They tell your men they're nothing without their system. They whisper that your race has no future, all lies, but dangerous lies, because they plant seeds of doubt in fertile soil. And doubt grows into change stronger than steel. But let me tell you this, the system fears one thing: you're awakening. They fear the moment you realize that the game is rigged. They fear the moment you look behind the curtain and see the machine. They fear the moment you stop begging and start building. The moment you stop asking for permission and start taking control. Weakness feeds, but strength starves them. Unity starves them. Knowledge starves them. Self-sufficiency starves them. Because once you rise above dependency, they lose control. Once you claim your dignity, they lose their grip. Once you realize that everything they told you about your weakness was a lie, they lose the very weapon that kept you down. Talent is lost in dependency. But the moment we move, the moment we stand, the moment we build, everything changes. Independence is not just about land, though land matters. It's not just about money, though money matters. Independence is about spirit. It's about dignity. It's about being able to wake up in the morning and say, today, my future is in my hands. It's about looking at your children and knowing they don't have to beg for a seat in someone else's world, because they have a world of their own. And here's the truth. The system doesn't want you independent, because independence means they lose their grip. Independence means they lose their leverage. Independence means they can no longer dictate the rhythm of your life. That's why they fear it. That's why they fight it. That's why they'll call it dangerous, radical, even impossible. But remember this, every dream that was ever worth dreaming was once called impossible. So I stand here to say independence is the solution. Dignity is the goal. And together with courage, with unity, with faith, we can build it, not on borrowed land, not in borrowed systems, not with borrowed dreams, but with our own hands, our own strength, our own vision. Because only then will we know what it means to be truly free.